SRM Institute of Science and Technology, Engineering, Medical and Health Sciences, Management, Dental, Science and Humanities, Law, Agriculture Sciences, Hotel Management. Admissions open.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the latest webinar by the SRM Institute of Science and Technology and the Hindu. I'm Anand Venkateswaran, your moderator today. This means I have the fun job of listening to the amazing experts we have with us today and asking them questions. In fact, this is a role I share with all of you in the audience. Feel free to drop in your questions as and when they pop up. This afternoon, we're going to talk about how the pandemic has highlighted cybersecurity concerns and what this means for the students in the field. This is such an important discussion, ladies and gentlemen. COVID-19 has accelerated our journey towards virtual worlds. We have all been spending so much time online, and this world is full of dangers. Fortunately, we have some pioneers and warriors in the field of education, security, and law to light our way ahead and also to open up some opportunities in this new and exciting world. So without further ado, let's jump right in. I'm going to introduce our guests very briefly. But to know more about them, and there is a lot more to know about them, do check out their profiles online and read up on their work. First up, it's an honor and a pleasure to introduce Dr. Revathi Venkatraman, Professor and Chairperson of the School of Computing at the SRM Institute of Science and Technology. She has authored more than 70 papers in reputed journals, transactions, and international national conferences. Professor Revathi has been heading many research projects sponsored by the Indian government's Defense Research Development Organization, the Department of Science and Technology, over the last 8 years. She has also patented a few of her innovative ideas in wireless networking. She has served as one of the co-members in SRM Innovation and Incubation Center for promoting innovation and entrepreneurship in the SRM Institute of Science and Technology, in collaboration with Sutarja Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology at the University of California, Berkeley, and Kingston University in the UK. Dr. Revathi, welcome. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Anand. May I start sharing the screen, please?
Yes, please.
Is it visible?
Yes.
Thank you, Anand. So a very good evening to all the students, aspiring students, parents. I'm happy to connect with you all through this virtual conclave. And I did like to share a few points on the side aspects about cybersecurity and what are the career prospects that are for you. So, as we start embracing this digital technology in our day-to-day lives, like having smart laptops, devices, virtual payments, making virtual payments, and then getting logged on to the messaging services, and even the fitness devices that we use. So they are generating lots and lots of data and information. And this is the security of these devices and also the data gains a paramount importance, right? So because it's all the privacy that we need to look into. And if you look at the cyber threats that are available, that has been happening before the pandemic hit us, the cyber criminals have always been trying to exploit people's ignorance and lack of awareness And they always try to promote misinformation and scam people out of their money and information, personal data. So this has been occurring even before the pandemic. The social engineering attacks like phishing has always been a very, very favorite among the cyberpunks. And they trick people into giving lots of sensitive informations like login credentials, and then the bank details, credit card information, and so on. And this email phishing is one of the effective, very high reward, and minimal investment strategy for the hackers to gain access to some of the credentials. So these are mostly ransomware attacks. And if you look at our Indian scenario, 76% of the Indian companies are hit by cyber attacks sometime in 2018. Now, if you look this pandemic is not only the 2020. If you look at 2020, it is not only a year of global health crisis, but it is also the year of cyber pandemic. Lots of companies have to force their employees to work from home, and some of the employees lack this sufficient training on cyber security aspects, and this has given lot of opportunities for the cyber criminals to hop on many people's sensitive data. And there has been an exponential increase in the cyber criminal activities. The cyber criminals have started to leverage this particular pandemic situation and just try to play havoc among the people's lives. Even the recent report by FBI has suggested that there is a 400% increase in the cyber activities, and Interpol has also recorded an alarming increase in the cyber activities, mainly targeted as major corporations, governments, critical infrastructure, especially medical infrastructure, and so on. And most of these cyber criminals are always looking at these ransomware attacks, data breaches, and some are nation and state sponsored attacks also. Now we will look at some of the very popular threats that have happened in the recent times, which has affected the major corporate companies. The first one is a game, the Blue Whale Challenge, which many of you know. Like, it's a game which assigns a series of tasks to the players, probably over a 50-day period or so. First, it starts trying to ask the participants to do some small innocent things. And later on, it introduces elements of self-harm and final challenges requiring the player to hurt themselves for unfortunate incidents. The next is a very popular Twitter cryptocurrency attack, which happened sometime during the pandemic in July, last July. So what it did was, it was someone took control of the many accounts, popular accounts like politicians' accounts, business executives, companies' accounts, and then they forced these people to sending a Bitcoin to that account. So this scam netted around $117 billion. And then later on, it was found that it was a small 17-year-old lad from Florida. And the next one was this SolarWinds hack, which again got popularity in recent times, and which really shook this US national security. And from what we understand, the Russian intelligence agencies were able to successfully plant some malware into the software updates. And because of this, whenever you do a software update, this malware also get into this, trying to penetrate sensitive government and private networks. And Microsoft was the one which was most hit by this particular scam. And these cyber criminals have not stopped with these IT areas alone. So they have set their eyes on some of the pharma companies also, where these pharma companies are busy doing this all important work of preparing the vaccines and bringing it out in a very short period of time. So they hold very valuable data and like the research information and the potential vaccines that other companies or governments would love to get their hands on. It was found that the web servers of the Serum Institute of India was hacked many times, and there were lots of people were trying to identify lots of vulnerabilities from this particular web server. Now, so what does this all box down to? Like, what do we infer from all these things? All is not lost. It means that you have a big career prospect in cybersecurity. The cybersecurity market is all set to boom in the next couple of years. Even now, it is currently exploding like anything. This domain of cybersecurity is progressively challenging and a rapidly expanding one. And if you look at the way in which the cybersecurity, that is, the way in which the digital technology adoption is happening in India, the cybersecurity jobs are in great demand. And this demonetization has also opened up lots of opportunities with financial services, banks, payment gateways, and so on. And there are lots of IoT cybersecurity related attacks as per the survey. Now, if you look at the career, like what sort of job profiles you might have in cybersecurity, there are lots of things. It's a huge umbrella under which lots of specifics, domain specifics are there. Digital forensics and analysis is one such thing. And then the penetration testing, which is most popular among the youngsters for systems, networks, and applications. So that is a very attractive domain. And similarly, you have this infrastructure security, cloud security, securing the virtual private networks, and the list goes on and on. And as I told you already, it is an expanding domain. And now, how this AI and ML plays a major role in cybersecurity. Lots of AI and ML has disrupted the technology in recent days. Lots of developments, research and developments have happened in this particular area. And it has become all the more easy for detecting the cyber attacks through intelligent AI algorithms. And while it is said in this manner, it is also the way, it is also a very boom for the cyber criminals also. So those AI capabilities that are used to identify and stop cyber attacks can also be used by the hackers to launch sophisticated cyber attacks in the form of complex and adaptive malicious software. So AI and ML go hand on hand with cybersecurity. And now coming to the skills and what are the things that you need to look at. So the first step is to have an undergraduate degree in any of the computing related fields like computer science, information technology, systems engineering, or any other similar field. And then, so in this, you will be getting the foundations right, the fundamentals you will catch up early. The fundamentals related to networks, operating systems, which are very much crucial for the understanding in cybersecurity. And then you need to be proficient in some of the languages, basic languages, which are listed here. Lots of security certifications are being out there, which are being offered by many companies like Cisco, and then CompTIA certification, certified ethical hacker, and so on. So you need to upskill on these things. And then you have this, you need to be on the lookout for some of the flagship events in cybersecurity, like very important conferences, DEF CON, and then lots of security competitions. where you will, when you get into this, you might be sort of, you may be able to know what is the reason happening that's in this particular domain. And then you have this big bounty program where they will reward you, like when you find some vulnerabilities in the platforms or tools, like successful, very popular things like Microsoft, Facebook, Twitter. They have this big bounty program, and whenever you find a vulnerability and report, they will be able to give you this reward. So these are some of the things that you need to do to develop your skills. Yeah, I'll stop right with this, and then I'll be happy to take your questions during the discussions round. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Revati. That was a very insightful presentation. It gave us a very in-depth view of how the world has changed, at least the virtual world has changed during the pandemic, and also opens up quite a few opportunities as promised. You did talk about career opportunities in the field of cybersecurity, and our next speaker will be able to speak to that most effectively, I think. It's a pleasure to welcome Mr. Pankit Desai, who's the co-founder and CEO of SecureTech, a Mumbai-based cybersecurity company that started in 2013 and has become the fastest growing Indian cybersecurity firm in the country, with offices in Gurgaon, Bengaluru, and the US. The company focuses on cybersecurity space. It was launched in 2013 with an aim to provide enterprise clients an end-to-end cybersecurity platform. Mr. Pankit is a veteran of the IT industry. He brings over 20 years of hardcore technology and leadership experience from the information technology industry to lead SecureTech. He has also served in senior leadership capacity with NTT Data, IntelliGroup, Wipro, and IBM India. Mr. Pankit, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. So let me start by, since there are about 300 plus kids on the call, let me start by helping them understand how the landscape has changed over a period of time and what it therefore means from a security risk perspective. So if you were to look at digital consumption in 2020, roughly about 67% of the population was using mobile phones and a fairly active social media usage. And just in 1 year, those numbers have changed dramatically, right? So there's a significant increased penetration that is happening world over. And India itself, roughly, it used to be about 2 hours a day is what we used to spend on internet. That amount has gone to about 7 hours, so about 350% increase on digital consumption that has happened in India, backed by low bandwidth and people sitting at home and not having much to do and consuming technology on the fly. What it also means is that the way the internet minute, so this basically is a sampling of what gets consumed over the net in a single minute. And so there's just too many numbers here, but if you were to look at some points that I kind of highlighted, so roughly about 50% increase in the amount of money spent online, the amount of about 35% increase in the number of Snapchat related conversations, TikTok, about almost a 3+X increase in the TikTok consumptions, and about double 200% increase in the Twitch consumption. And across the board, every single area, if you were to look, there is an increase in consumption. But what it tells us is that on one hand, there's an increased penetration of smartphones and internet. And second then is the lack of avenues for people to go out has meant that you are spending a lot of time on internet. What it therefore does, it kind of creates a very different thought process. And this is what I wanted to capture here. This is a geographical map I pulled for the internet, but this is how boundaries of organizations, countries are set up, right? So we have this physical boundaries and we believe that things can't go from one country to the other country. But here is what the internet world looks like, right? So in internet world, this is how connectivity really breaks barriers, right? So today, WhatsApp is the largest messaging platform. And again, I'm not talking about WhatsApp not being present anywhere. It's just that these are the countries where they are either number one or number two, right? That's how the penetration has happened. So there are no boundaries when you look at internet. What it means for us as citizens and countries is that you have empowered users, right? I don't know if you followed this whole Black Lives Matter protest that started after killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, but that protest went viral. So you had protests happening in South America, in UK, in France. I mean, it was one event happening to one local activity in Minneapolis. It just went viral. If you followed Arab Spring in early 2010s, it started by the merchant who self-immolated in Tunisia, and it ran viral to the entire Middle East with the regime change that happening galore, right? Same thing with fake news, same thing with TikTok, and TikTok personas become viral. So users are becoming very empowered where they can take these platforms and the content and just take it all over the place. And as far as enterprises are concerned, companies are concerned, tech has now become an integral part of how they do business, right? So it's no longer agriculture, it is agri-tech. It is no longer health, it is health tech. It is no longer med, it's med tech. It is not education, ed tech. Everything has got a tech behind it. It's about 3 years back, BMW had launched a car called as i8. i8 had more computers than most laboratories that will come across. About 256 IP addresses were sitting out in a BMW car. So can you believe it? It's less a car and more a network. If you look at Tesla, Tesla is completely a computer. There are hardly anything that controls from a mechanical hydraulic perspective. It's completely a computer-based system, right? So that's what is a transformation. So on one hand, you have empowered users who really are taking technology to the hilt, and then there are companies that are using it to the maximum potency to improve the way they go to market. Whenever there's a technology that comes in, you have an ancillary security risk, right? And Dr. Revati covered a lot of what happened from a attacks perspective. I'm not going to go down in detail. These are all publicly available information. You just search it up. But needless to say, every day you open the newspaper, there is something or the other that has happened in terms of phishing and ransomwares and sales agents getting conned and a bunch of things that happens, right? So this is what citizens have to worry about. And if you were to look at enterprises, I just picked cases in India. This is what has happened in India, where companies have been attacked mercilessly and people are losing money. The latest being Dr. Reddy's. They made an announcement of a joint venture with the Russian company for manufacturing Sputnik vaccines. And within 2 weeks, their entire network was taken down by a ransomware attack, right? So these are very targeted attack where people time events to really create the biggest harm to the organization, either from a reputation perspective, financial impact, or anything that they're really wanting to go after data theft. I'll give you a point of view of how an attack happens, right? So if you were to today Google Anand or mine or Dr. Revati's name, there will be enough public information about us, right? So we leave, unfortunately, a lot of digital footprint, whether we like it or not, right? And kids these days on Snapchat and Instagram and Weibos and Facebooks and LinkedIn's, you are present even if you want it, and internet doesn't forget. What happens is that attackers harvest that information. They use then social engineering mechanisms to go after your device. You end up downloading a piece of software, which typically is a malware, which then tries to do what it is required to do in terms of establishing a command and control network. So if you're as a part of a university, SRM University, there's a kid's laptop that's got infected, you come plug it into your school, college network, and then the information just goes viral. The network, the malware just goes viral. And you have series of attacks that get taken up in terms of data theft or ransomware. Oxford University, when they announced their tie-up with AstraZeneca, there's a group called as APT 41. They went after the environment with a single purpose to really figure out a way to steal the entire vaccine information. It was basically a joint capability of North Korea and China that had gone after the AstraZeneca environment, but going to the university route, right? So this is how an attack typically gets carried out, that you use social media, get the information, create a targeted attack, and then once you are in the environment, then you move laterally to steal information. What ends up happening is an attack either results into a sensitive information theft, like in the case of, let's say, the Prime Focus, where the Game of Thrones episodes were stolen, or a ransomware attack like Dr. Reddy's, where you bring the system down, or in case of Cognizant, where they had to pay $70 million to get out of it, right? It could be one of the two, it could be all three together. The recent Colonial Pipeline attack in the US, I just heard today morning, they paid $5 million to get out of it, but they stole about 100 gigabytes of data. They shut down the pipeline, which basically meant that they were not able to send fuel from Texas all the way to Georgia and up north for a period of 6 days, right? So it is business continuity impact, financial impact, and obviously brand reputation loss. I don't know, you probably were not born when the movie was released, but it's an amazing movie. Please watch it when you get a chance. It's Catch Me If You Can. DiCaprio and Tom Hanks are the cat and mouse in the entire movie, but the character of DiCaprio is this individual called Frank Abagnale Jr. And he has a, so he was the one who carried out the scam, and he finally gets caught, and he becomes part of the FBI as a consultant. And he has a very nice statement. He basically says that all major cyber attacks are not because someone has spending millions of dollars and really using some very sophisticated way to go after it. It just happens because people do stupid stuff on internet, leaving doors open where they should not be. And that is what is used and abused by the attackers. And what do they abuse? Is basically this, as I always like to say, humans are the biggest malware, right? And the reason they do is that we all have curiosity. We also have a bit of ignorance. So things that come, social attacks are like, hey, you have won an award. Or, hey, you got some prize in lottery. You're not participated. You're not ordered stuff. Why are you clicking on the links, right? It is just the urge, the curiosity to go and do something which you're not supposed to do. You end up doing something. And in the process, you end up exposing yourself and the extended organization with you, because of which the price has to be paid, right? So if you do some basic stuff, this is a thing that you can avoid. What has happened in this process is someone I saw in the group asking questions on regulatory oversight. So yes, there is a regulatory oversight in India also. So every geography has figured out a way to respond to this in some form of regulatory oversight. So we have the IT Act, the Data Privacy Act is likely to come out. Each sector has a regulation by itself. Not as great as I would like, and Ms. Napani will be probably say much more than I will be. But there is an attempt being made to get arms around this problem statement. And as usual, the regulator comes the last, or I think the Hindi movies, the police comes the last. Maybe that's what it is. But they will finally catch up is what my point of view here is. As students, what could you do, right? Just look at these 5 simple steps is what I say. Abide, if you were to look at the acronym Abide, at the bare minimum for your laptops and desktop, please buy an anti-malware. If you can buy a laptop for 40,000 rupees, you can buy 1,000 rupees anti-malware. I'm sure you can do that much. If you can't do it, there are free versions available. Please buy that. Please back up your data, right? There are free services available. If nothing else, a USB drive costs $100 these days. Just back up your data. Be very, very sure about your identity, right? Your user IDs and passwords. Please make sure that you understand them. You keep changing them. And please don't keep the same passwords for all your social media and personal accounts, because that's what happens. They harvest these IDs, and let's say they'll take your Facebook ID and your user IDs and passwords, and then they know, okay, you're also in SRM. Let me try and see if the same combination of user ID password will work for an SRM institute. And let's say if you're in research, very, very easy for me to then just take the harvested credentials and go after it. So please make sure you understand your identity. Data privacy. I know we are all hooked on to this free services that people give, Google Maps, WhatsApp, Snapchats, Facebooks. Please read your data privacy norms. If you don't need to be on the platform, please don't be on the platform. At least if nothing else, understand what you're giving up as your rights before you sign it up. And the last part is enhance and update, which basically means is that all your systems and processes on your devices, please use legitimate versions, don't use pirated versions, and keep upgrading your operating systems and the applications so that the vulnerabilities, Ma'am talked about SolarWinds attack. The SolarWinds attack happened because of a patch update that was not done. The ransomware attack that happened in 17, which was Petya and non-Petya and WannaCry, was also because of the Microsoft vulnerability was not patched. So please update your systems so that at least the attackers don't have an easy way. Not that all of this will solve your security problems, but it will make it that much more difficult for the attacker to come in, right? So make the entry barrier for the attacker as high as possible. I have a couple of links that I have written articles on the subject. If you get a chance, I'll ask the university to send it out to you, but you can read up and get better informed. That's all I had to cover. Over to you, Anand.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pankit. That was super helpful. The last slide especially, I think, is worth reiterating to everybody. The acronym is A.B.I.D.E. Ladies and gentlemen, please do remember, those are the basics of cybersecurity that you do need to keep in mind. Now, we heard from Dr. Revati about the landscape itself of cybersecurity, how it has changed over the last year and a half. We've heard from Mr. Pankit on the various tools available to us to counter cybersecurity threats. Now, we hear from Ms. Napinai, who will tell us what happens, what recourse we have when something bad happens. So this, in short, sort of rounds up the entire presentation that we have today sort of covers all angles of it. It's a pleasure to invite Ms. N.S. Napinai to the stage. She's a Supreme Court advocate and founder of Cyber Sathi. She's a senior and renowned lawyer since 1991, specializing in constitutional, criminal, IPR, and cyber laws. Ms. Napinai is an advisor to the Tamil Nadu E-Governance Agency, the TNEGA, with special focus on the legal aspects of IPR, blockchain, and artificial intelligence. She is an advisor to the Maharashtra Cyber Police. She represented the government of Kerala in a seminal litigation on data protection and recently acknowledged by the Cyber Peace Foundation, SheThePeople.tv, and Security Today for her contribution in cyber laws. Welcome, Ms. Napinai. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Anand. Very interesting to hear all the speakers and all the inputs that they've shared. Even more interesting to read all the questions that have been coming up in the Q&A box. I thought I should start with the last one on how you should become a hacker. So before you try to become a hacker, it may be relevant for you to know what the law says about you becoming a hacker or committing a hack, right? So let me just walk you quickly through. I'm kind of like going to, you've been at a very high level talking about technology and its prospects, be it for the cybersecurity professional or for the cyber criminals. Let me just bring you all a little bit down to earth to evaluate on three things which I want to cover in my opening statement. The first, of course, I'll keep it very brief because a lot of it has already been covered by the earlier speakers, which is on what are the threats that you face as students, young adults, millennials, who are very comfortable with technology, but may not really invest as much time, energy, or money in security aspects. The second, a very important aspect, because Dr. Revati's opening statement talked about the number of cyber crimes that are happening more so during and after COVID-19. But when you look at the numbers in terms of how many crimes are being committed, as opposed to how many complaints are being filed or how many FIRs are being registered, you will be shocked. It's like chalk and cheese. There is no comparison because we are talking in millions when it comes to crimes, and there are not even a few thousand cases that are being registered. One possibility could be that the victims may not know what are the rights and remedies they have in law. So one of the first things I did, and very good use I put to, the first COVID lockdown, was to set up Cyber Sathi. That was when it was conceptualized nearly 4-5 years back. But I finally got down to setting up the website and then the organization, etc. thereafter, the very first week of the lockdown. And the whole idea behind setting up Cyber Sathi was this, that not just victims, but in many instances, I noticed that even professionals may not be aware of what is the law when it comes to cyber crimes and where does their remedy lie. Do they have a remedy at all or not? So I would be addressing on that aspect because it's very important for you to know what is the remedy you have so that you can avail of it. So of course, there'll be a quick run through in terms of how can you avail of these remedies. And finally, because I am speaking today to a multitude which is very comfortable with technology. But it's not just security that you may not pay much attention to, but also the legality of your actions. Many times I have noticed not just students, not just youngsters. Again, I'm drawing on Dr. Revati's presentation to point out, and she pointed out one instance where the attack was, the Twitter attack was initiated or instigated by a teenager. Let me tell you, some of the largest hacks, some of the largest attacks across the world have been instigated by teenagers, right? And in one instance in the UK, when the criminal, I mean, it's so unfortunate to call a 16-year-old a criminal, but when that boy was asked, why did you do this? It cost one of the largest, UK's mammoth corporation to fold. 150,000 people lost their jobs within just the first few months of this hack and data breach. Okay, and several millions lost. And when the boy was asked why, he said, because he could do it. So sometimes you think you're meeting a challenge. Sometimes you think you're just testing something out, the more worrisome part of it. And that's why I chose the hacking question first to address. Sometimes, and it's really scary how often this happens, many people think, and therefore the last part which she said about how big companies value inputs about weaknesses in their systems has to be approached very cautiously. You cannot, of your own accord, start hacking into a corporate system and think that you can use what vulnerabilities you have found out to either garner money or a job from the company. You will not be that lucky. You may just end up behind bars, because any form of intrusive process without the consent of the owner or administrator of a computer system is a violation. It could be a civil breach, and where it is committed for dishonest or fraudulent intent, it can also be a criminal, it can also lead to a criminal prosecution. So often I'm asked, what is the difference between a hacker and an ethical hacker or a white hatter as opposed to the black hatter? And here is where the difference is. You may, of course, learn about hacking. You may also apply it, but you can only apply it with the consent of the owner or administrator of a system. If you do it without that consent, then you are committing a legal violation, civil or criminal, or both, right? So be very careful what you do also with your knowledge. And finally, if perchance you still get a little adventurous and you think you can just test somebody's system out, and then you write to them saying, look, I found this vulnerability, I'm doing you a favor, don't be surprised if you get a reply saying that they will be acting against you. Okay. And two, many instances that I have dealt with in my practice as a lawyer, where people have also gone to the extent of threatening a company, saying either you compensate me for the effort that I've taken, or I will disclose this vulnerability in your system or the weaknesses in your system online or to the public. That by itself, just making the threat itself, is a criminal offense. So be very careful. As I said, be very careful what you do with your knowledge of technology, because every single act that you do which amounts to a crime can be prosecuted. And that's the last part of the message I want carried forward. One, just because you're doing something online does not mean that you cannot be tracked or traced. You may use certain kinds of, because I may be speaking to some very very knowledgeable technologists or technocrats. You may have the wherewithal to mask your track. I call it in my book the breadcrumb trail. And of course I'm benchmarking it to Hansel and Gretel. As with Hansel and Gretel's breadcrumb trail, it is just a breadcrumb trail. It may disappear if the birds get to it before the police do, but the trail is always there. And if the system is quick enough, you can be tracked, you can be traced, and you can be punished. Why am I emphasizing this so much? Let me bring you all down a little bit to ground realities in terms of the kind of cyber crimes you may already have faced, either as a victim or as a perpetrator. Because we are talking about ransomware, we are talking about hacking and virus attacks. Everything seems like very distant. Everything seems like something that an engineering student or maybe, since I'm speaking about law student needs to worry about, but it doesn't concern the common man. You could not be farther away from truth. And if any of you believe you have not been a victim of cybercrime, again, you may be wrong. or probably you are wrong, right? Let me just walk you through some of the trends that have been happening pre-COVID and more so post-COVID, right? The first and foremost that I always address is with respect to cyberbullying and cyber stalking. The number of instances, June 1, 2020, the academic year started. And with before the classes ended, trolling of teachers had started. So videos the teachers had made for the benefit of students was being utilized first for general prankish statements, right? You may think by putting something that is meant for your usage online, you may think you are just pranking somebody. But look at what happened. What may be probably started as a prank landed up in very serious offenses. From general comments about the teacher and the way she was teaching, etc., comments moved on to sexual innuendo and possibly even threats to that lady. So this is how far cyberbullying can go. Many may tell you, oh, there is no remedy in law. We just have to lump it. Don't feed the troll. Of course, don't feed the troll, but that doesn't mean that's all the remedy you have. You have very, very strong remedies in law depending on how bullying is committed. So you need to take the facts of each case and then modulate your remedies, because law does not function based on headings. Headings are irrelevant when it comes to applying the law. What the provisions say is what matters. And if what you did or what has been done to you falls within that provision, then you have your remedy. Similarly, cyber stalking. Even if it is an educational institution, one of the most worrisome, persistent case of cyber stalking comes from an educational institution, where a very senior management person was not just stalking and bullying students, he was resorting to cyber stalking of lady staff also. And finally, one braveheart came out and filed a complaint, and then action was taken. And when action was taken, that was when it was found out that hers was not a single incident. There were many such incidents. So, this is why I wanted to emphasize that it is very, very important that you come out and file your complaints, because if you don't file your complaints, the criminal is emboldened. I have dealt with so many cases which would start off with simple instances of bullying, thinking that it's a joke. And then it gets aggravated because you did nothing. And then the criminal starts thinking that they are perfectly within their rights to do whatever they want, say what they want, and you're going to be too scared to act against them. And unfortunately, in many cases, we have found out later through forensics that the perpetrator was also a student or a colleague or your neighbor or your family member. So it's invariably somebody very close to you who's committing a crime. So you need to be really careful on that. One final thought, because I'm also conscious and keeping an eye on the clock. So couple of things which I'll just club together in terms of threats and your remedies. People get into relationships very early today. We have been armed with a very, very powerful weapon, this one, right? And we do not realize how serious this particular part of this weapon is. And we've been given this weapon without a manual. Remember that this is not just a tool, it is a weapon, and use it very cautiously, therefore. If perchance it is abused or misused, or consensually also, if the imagery, photographs, videos, etc. are recorded, that does not give the person in possession the right to share it. If you share videos or photographs which were recorded by consent of both parties also, but where the person has not given consent for the sharing, it is a criminal offense. It is not just something that you did, forget it, it's okay, you're just a kid, or you're just somebody who didn't know it was an offense. I'm sorry to tell you all that ignorance of law is not an excuse. You can be hauled up, and once you get a criminal record, that's it. Your future is gone. A few days back, in a case I'm handling, somebody was requesting whether there was a possibility of settlement because this person who indulged in a morphing case was not able to get a job. And that's the reality. And I'm talking over 10 years, right? So law goes in a very slow pace and you have your remedy. So victims should not start blaming themselves. They should not be blamed also when they go to file a complaint, when they want to come and inform the educational institution, because schools and colleges are the best first responders for these kind of cases. So they should be well equipped to deal with these situations, have in place processes for understanding how to deal with it. If the children, the perpetrator as well as the victim, particularly if the victim is a minor, then it's mandatory for everybody who gets to know about an offense to file a complaint. And therefore, the educational institution should be well equipped. And finally, most times, students are a lot more comfortable approaching the educational institutions rather than even their parents. And therefore, in fact, the name Cyber Sati, because the whole idea is firstly, a victim will approach a friend and the friend should be well equipped to deal with it. That friend could be also the school or college, and therefore they have to be well equipped to it. And today's situation is such that every adult also has to be well equipped to deal with these kind of situations. Instead of just blaming their children, they should be understanding, they should know what is happening around, what are the trends, figure out what can be the preventive and protective measures, because prevention and protection is the better part of cure. And finally, what are the remedies in law? Today, I told you I'll at least touch upon the possibility for you all on how do you approach law. You can file your complaint online. Today, you don't just sit at home and get your classes or even handle court hearings, but you can also file your complaint from home. Please note down this website, cybercrime.gov.in. The government has set up a national website for you to file your cybercrime complaints. Please avail of it. Do not suffer silently. And here is also, therefore, my input for all you aspirants for law. You have a huge potential in terms of a career in law. This is an evolving field. You can grow with the field. So all the best to you on that. Over to you, Anand.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was scary and also a little inspiring at the same time. Scary because it's become so easy to step outside the bounds of what is allowed. It is so easy to break the law because of the devices we have, because the boundaries of technology and geography have melded so closely together. So I think it is up to us to be more vigilant. At the same time, like you close this off, the opportunities are also growing quite a bit. If a 17-year-old teenager can bring down an entire conglomerate, it means that he also has the power to change the world in many positive ways, to become part of the movement that protects rather than disrupts what's going on here. So I think I'll take and hold on to that part of the message quite strongly. And the other one, I think, would have you would have very successfully infused in all of us. Fear of the law is very easy to infuse. So I think we'll take that also in hand. I have a question. There's been a whole range of questions in the Q&A part of it, and they are all fascinating in a sense. I've been trying to put them under certain buckets to see if we can address them effectively. This question is to Dr. Revati, actually. We had a session earlier in the day, another webinar about artificial intelligence. And there is a question that ties in that session along with this. How interdisciplinary is cybersecurity? For instance, if I am pursuing a certain degree now, even if it seems like some sort of a tangent, can I opt for cybersecurity as either a supplementary course, or how do I become part of it? So Dr. Revati, what are the next steps that I can take as a student to become part of the cybersecurity movement?
Yeah. So if you look at cybersecurity itself is a very interdisciplinary domain, and it almost touches all parts of the thing, as referred by Ms. Nappinai. See, you have a whole law, cyber law, which is a ocean by itself, right? And if you look at the smart manufacturing from the engineering perspective, the industrial or production engineering or smart manufacturing, again, when you start automating the devices, the cybersecurity becomes a very important component in this, right? So this spans over domain. And as I told you already in my talk, what you have to do is you have to just go on with like pick up a course, anything related to computing, like computer science or IT or whatever, systems engineering or whatever. And then after that, you can try to do a specialization. There are lots of, many of the institutes offer certain minor programs. So these minor programs are maybe in this certain specialized domains. So you can always opt for a core thing, and then you can you can choose a minor in cybersecurity. So that is also possible. Otherwise, you can take a computer science and engineering, and then there are certain institutes which offer security as a specific domain specialization in computer security, network security. And here we have cyber security at SRM. We have computer science with specialization in cyber security. So that is the way you need to go about.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, ma'am. This next one is for Mr. Pankit. I was wondering, sir, because how do you deal with security in an increasingly automated world? We did again touch upon artificial intelligence, whether it is vehicle automation or the Internet of Things. Increasingly, there is also this worry in the back of our mind. The more automated there are, maybe the vectors of attack also increase, especially when a lot of these things are centralized, right? So one central control, if it is breached, will it have bad repercussions across the board? For instance, like power grids, healthcare, traffic and transport, and so on. So how do you view security in such an increasingly automated world?
So you bring a great point. So there's this whole discussion around critical infrastructure, right? So power, telecom, highways, utilities, stock exchanges, banks, these are all considered critical infrastructure. So in India, there is this National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Council, NCIIPC. And it's a body that is chartered with understanding the risks that happen across all this critical infrastructure. And what they've done is they also created cyber certs or sector specific certs, which is looking at each, let's say, telecom and power and all of them. Unfortunately, in India, like everything else, a great policy, fairly poor execution. And the second problem is that in most cases, for this critical infrastructure, the technology is fairly closed, by which I mean is that you source this technology from the OEM, which could be Europeans or Chinese. A lot of Chinese have now got into this environment, and you have no control over what that underlying technology is. So there is a whole policy specific stuff that needs to be done with the organization having some teeth behind it, like say like for an RBI. It can shut a bank down if you do not follow the cybersecurity policy of RBI. That's it. They'll just close it down. I mean, just this whole HDFC Bank fiasco that happened a few weeks back, they have shut HDFC Bank from issuing any more credit cards, no more transformation initiative, but they have the teeth. So one part is the regulatory framework that needs to be done. Second is to contextually understand who your friends and enemies are, right? And you need to be really sure about the technology that gets absorbed in some of this critical infrastructure. And you really want to make sure that that technology comes from a set of states that you can trust. Right? And this whole question about 5G and banning Chinese company, there is some science and logic behind it because there is understanding that goes. Right? And the last part is, as an organization, as a set of individuals, you really need to, some of these things are out of your control. Right? There's a major power outage that happened in Mumbai a few months back. Now it is being attributed to external powers, and this was the same time when India-China conflict was at its peak. Right? And unfortunately, in India, we do not acknowledge that we have a problem, right? So we did not for a very long time acknowledge that this was actually a cyber attack carried out on critical infrastructure. Unless you acknowledge, you are not going to solve the problem, right? So the problem has to be addressed at 3 levels. Otherwise, you will have a situation where a central attack can get created. And there's a recent case in Tamil Nadu where a nuclear power facility, there was an outage. right? And again, we did not acknowledge it. And then finally, external forces put it up in the media, and now we are saying, oh yeah, it was just there, but a small problem. That is not how you deal with this problem.
Agreed. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, but totally agree. Totally agree. But just like with any other new and emerging field, there are some open-ended questions that need answers and need concerted effort from many stakeholders, not just one. So I absolutely agree with that. I have a small addendum to your acronym of ABIDE, which I wanted to touch upon. What about mobile devices? We don't think as much when we use our mobile phones as we do with a desktop or a laptop. And they are, they capture more of our information, personal identity, and because we are pretty much hooked to them 24/7. So what do we keep in mind? What is the mobile equivalent of ABIDE?
So most of it will still be relevant, except for the anti-malware per se doesn't have that sense of a relevance because of the closed nature of the system. You still have anti-malware software that are available. I would say, I don't want to sound presumptuous, stay away from cheap phones, right? Because a lot of these cheap phones have backdoors that are being abused, and the Chinese ones, again going back to the same thing, aren't the great technology to use. There is a whether I don't want to name the players on an open forum, but you can search them up. There's enough and more public information about all of these available. The second piece is around identity, still holds true. Please make sure backing up your data still more holds true. And as kids, if there is a way, because all of these are going through a network, if there is a way, if they're going through a home network, if you can monitor, or have controls that are set up that allows you to stop going to bad sites, right? So that's one area that one can look at from that perspective. So there has to be a slightly different version of acronym. Good point. I'll think about it and have an addendum that I'll send it out.
Awesome. Now this next one is to Ms. Napinai. Ma'am, I'm not trying to make this a trick question, but this is something I've observed, and I hope I can get an answer to this. There is an increasing trend of decentralization across the board, right? All industries and so on. And when we talk about technology, which can potentially cause harm, we are talking about global players, right? Whereas the law is localized. So how do you deal with a global problem like one of the slides that Mr. Pankaj showed reorganizes the world based on who's using what technology rather than lawfully drawn out borders. So how does law stay relevant in this kind of a morphing world?
Very interesting question and not very tricky at all. And actually, I've addressed it in 2 chapters in my book. I start off with this construct of cyber Pangea. So I've said, for all of you who love movies, especially Ice Age, so, I've used the reversal of the mental imagery, and I've called it the reversal of the continental drift. And I call it cyber Pangea because what the continental drift took apart, cyber has brought back together. So we are kind of like one big nation state, but that's not the way reality works. So in fact, I start off with this construct in my first chapter. In the last chapter, I've already evaluated in terms of international enforcement mechanisms. So if you look at what is happening now, I think Pankaj had talked about, or I don't remember if it was Dr. Revati, about Interpol and a lot of international cooperation, etc. So today, what is happening is called the dyadic or a twosome dialogue, right? So if you have a problem which emanates from country A, then you have a mutual legal assistance treaty, and then you could ask for help from one country to the other. Similarly, you will also have extradition treaties to deal with. In general criminal law, you also have the processes in place like a letters patent, etc., on how you will ask for cooperation. But all of this is not going to be sufficient when you're dealing with the cyber domain. I was actually going through all the questions and I was trying to answer some of them also while we were speaking. So one thing I noticed was a very pertinent question somebody had asked, saying if you're saying police can track, then why are they not doing enough of it? Very, very true. See, Anand, you're asking me about international. Let's first deal with national, or rather take it even more granular. You
Yeah.
know, when criminal law functions, you need to concern yourself about district to district, state to state, then the whole nation. And then we worry about international. So even between state to state, when we have a lot of red tape in terms of procedural aspects, and I told you it's a breadcrumb trail.
Yeah.
So the more you delay, the less chances there are of you grabbing the criminal. You need to act fast. In fact, a recent 2 days back or something, there is a report from Chennai of how in a phishing attack, the police were able to track and return about 25,000 to the victim. And believe me, 25,000 is a lot of money for a lot of people, right? So they were able to actually not just apprehend the criminal, but also grab the money and return it. You know, the police have the weaponry or the right to seize and help you. But for them to do that, you have to act immediately.
Very
And
good.
this success story happened because the complaint was given within 24 hours. So these are all lessons that we have to take even in preventive and protective measures, etc. As far as international is concerned, today we are dealing with the dyadic. We need something more than that if we have to deal with, because the other speakers, I spoke about very simple attacks, right? The other speakers talked about some very, very serious attacks. Many attacks have happened, not now, from a very long time back. One of the first worms, the virus worm, Morris worm, came in 1988. Any virus attack could also be deemed to be cyber warfare depending on what it attacks. For instance, the Stuxnet attack of a nuclear station, right? So if you talk about these huge things also, you don't have remedies. If you're talking about a simple issue of a cyber stalking or a cyber bullying, you may have the perpetrator sitting in the desk next to you, but it may be bounced off so many servers, so many routers, which is going to go all over the world. And you're going to land up having to take assistance not from one country to another country, but from multiple countries, right? And you're not going to do it because there is always a trade-off. The larger the problem, the more effort that will be put in to find a remedy. The smaller the problem, somebody may just tell you, listen, you learned your lesson, go and figure out, so and don't do it again, right? So we need to take in ground realities and be really careful, and we need to evolve. It's an evolving field in terms of where we stand on international enforcement. But let me not leave you feeling very sad. One of the things which I've done, I'm amicus before the Supreme Court in a matter where we are dealing with issues of child sexual abuse content online and violent videos against women being online. Okay, as part of that matter, Prajwala versus Union of India. As part of that matter, one of the most important developments that happened was an MOU with this organization called NCMEC or NICMIC. Okay, based on that, so now I have moved to the operational part because I'm also with as advisor Maharashtra Cyber, and we started what was called as Operation Blackface. I was just helping in terms of advisory. It's the police who are doing the actual implementation of it. And they did such a fantastic job. And they were able to track and find within a month, okay, 400 FIRs were registered. So when I say one FIR, it doesn't mean one criminal. It could even be one WhatsApp group for child sexual abuse content. So you have 250 plus criminals already captured, right? So that was the extent of international cooperation that we can get. And just before Operation Blackface was launched, there was a report of one individual who just landed in Bombay and immediately apprehended because Interpol had informed Indian police, and the minute he landed in India, he was caught. And his mobile, you talked about, and I spoke also, that's why about mobile being a weapon. His mobile contained 26,000 plus child sexual abuse content. But again, here is a positive story of how international cooperation works. See, we are all survivors. We will find ways and means to survive. We will find the ways and means to figure out the solution. What we need is not just solutions. What we need is to create trust in the minds of the users and of the victims, so that they know that there are remedies and they will get justice. That's where I believe we need better systems in place.
Wonderful, wonderful. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the top of the hour. But this has been a fascinating discussion, and I'm sure all the students watching this would have realized that there are some amazing opportunities for you in the field of cyber security. I know there are threats as well, because cyber crime is very portable. It's which is why it is also so prevalent and so hard to stop. But our experts here have given us an excellent roadmap to how to deal with this. Uh, Dr. Revati told us that the first step is awareness and to educate yourself in what you can do in trying to educate yourself of the landscape. Mr. Pankit taught us that caution is always the best approach when it comes to this. Arm not just your computer, but yourself with the tools necessary to do this. And Ms. Nappinai told us that to act fast and promptly is the best defense that you have, and to not delay. Be a responsible citizen, a responsible student of the field of cybersecurity. And all three of our experts have proved that cybersecurity is an interdisciplinary subject. Just because you're studying biology today or sociology or psychology, that doesn't mean that you are exempt from the field of cybersecurity. If you own a phone or if you work on a computer, it is very much your field as well. So do get involved. And because of the generation you're in, because you've been born into this, it's going to come a lot natural to you than to your previous generations. So with that, I thank you all for joining us today. Thank you so much. You've been wonderful, all of the experts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.